On a bitter January morning in 2000, a man walking his dog along the Grand Canal at Carneystown Bridge, County Kildare, stumbled upon a gruesome discovery. A man's naked body, lifeless, and floating in the icy water. The following day, as Garda divers combed the canal in search of a murder weapon, they pulled a second body from the water, intensifying the chilling mystery. 20-year-old Darren Carey and 19-year-old Patrick Murray were known to be low-level criminals entangled with a notorious drug gang from Ballyfermot in Dublin. Both young men had been executed with point-blank shots to the head. Disturbingly, it was reported that one of the victims had endured sexual assault before his death. The prime suspect in these brutal killings was Mark the guinea pig Desmond, a 24-year-old enforcer deeply enmeshed in the Ballyfermot drug trade. Desmond had already carved out a fearsome reputation for his brutal violence, and these murders only cemented his notoriety. Back in 2000, Garda investigators pieced together a chilling hypothesis. Darren Carey and Patrick Murray, having been caught with Desmond's drugs on a flight from Amsterdam to Dublin, were deemed such a liability by the young drug dealer that he decided to kill them both. Desmond allegedly lured the two young men to a deadly meeting in Ballyfermot, executing them in cold blood before dumping their bodies into the Grand Canal. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Jonathan Desmond, Mark's cousin, came forward. He revealed to the Gardaí that Mark had shown him a hidden cache of firearms in the back garden of a house on Lally Road in early December 1999. Jonathan also disclosed that Carey and Murray had accompanied Mark to Amsterdam, where they procured heroin to smuggle back to Dublin. Acting on Jonathan's tip, the Gardaí raided the house, uncovering an arsenal, 2 shotguns, a long rifle, an unused shotgun cartridge, and 3 spent cartridges. The prosecution argued that these weapons had been stolen in Athlone by local criminals and transported to Dublin. During the trial, evidence suggested the firearms were traded for heroin, further entangling Mark Desmond in a web of drug-related violence. Additionally, another shotgun, found in January 2000, was also traced back to Desmond's control. 6 months later, Mark the guinea pig Desmond was arrested, not only reviled for the murders, but also despised due to widespread beliefs that he was a paedophile who had raped a 15-year-old boy. Despite being arrested and questioned in 2000, Desmond remained tight-lipped, consistently replying "no comment," and was never charged with the sexual assault. However, in the case concerning the infamous canal murders, Gardaí managed to secure witness protection for several of Desmond's contacts, including an ex-girlfriend, who recounted how he had menaced her with a shotgun, accusing her of smoking heroin in the same house as their infant son. With their testimonies, they gathered sufficient evidence to charge Desmond in connection with the double murder. But as the trial was set to begin in 2002, a dramatic twist occurred. Several key witnesses suddenly refused to testify. On the trial's opening day, the state dropped the murder charges. Nevertheless, Desmond was convicted on 4 firearms offences and sentenced to 8 years in prison. In a bold move, he dismissed his legal team and chose to defend himself throughout the case. According to sources close to the case, while in Portlaoise prison, Desmond received tutelage from Patrick Dutchy Holland, the notorious figure named in court as the killer of journalist Veronica Guerin. When the guilty verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. Relatives clapped and cheered, some shouting, "You murderer." Another voice cried out, "I hope Darren comes back and haunts you." The tension peaked as the judge sentenced Mark Desmond to 8 years in prison. Amidst the chaos, anguished cries filled the air. "You murdering pig, murdering pig," one yelled. Another roared, "You're only brave with your guns in your hand. 2 children dead over your drug involvement." With a chilling smile, Desmond responded, "8 years, I'll do it on my back." As Desmond was led out, prison officials took him through a door normally reserved for the jury. In the corridor, relatives of the slain men, waiting for him, lunged in fury. Gardaí had to forcibly restrain them to prevent a violent confrontation. However, Desmond's time behind bars was short-lived. In December 2004, the Court of Criminal Appeal overturned his conviction, allowing him to walk free and cement his infamy as one of Ireland's most notorious criminals. Despite his stint in prison, Desmond, proving to be more cunning and intelligent than many had realised, taught himself how to read and write, preparing for a life that would continue to be marked by violence and controversy. Mark Desmond would soon become one of the most feared criminals in West Dublin. In the same year his trial for the double murder was due, he was suspected of involvement in yet another brutal killing. Maurice Bobo Ward, a 56-year-old former armed robber and hijacker, met a violent end. believed to be murdered in an act of revenge. Though the exact motive remains shrouded in mystery, with no clear explanation emerging and no charges ever filed, the shadow of Desmond's terror loomed large over the case. In April 2002, Ward, the father of 13 who had become a major player in Dublin's underworld, was shot dead at 10:20 p.m. in front of his partner Eileen and their 5 young boys at their home in Ronanstown, West Dublin. The gunman had forced his way into the house by smashing the front door as the family was having dinner. Seeing the intruder, Bobo raised his hands and said, "You must have the wrong house." Ignoring his plea, the gunman ordered Eileen and the children to get down on the floor, before shooting Ward twice at point-blank range in the chest with a sawn-off shotgun. A fighter to the end, Bobo struggled to remain conscious, but his injuries were fatal. He died minutes later. Bobo Ward had become a major player in Dublin's underworld. Meanwhile, Desmond had grown close to gangland criminal Wayne Whelan. In 2003, Whelan supported Desmond by testifying on his behalf during his trial. At that time, Whelan was in charge of a car sales company, which he and his gang used as a front for money laundering. He'd sold a 3-year-old Fiat Punto linked to the 1999 double murders, but testified that it was another man, not Desmond, who had paid him for it. In the years following his release, Mark Desmond became a more significant player in Dublin's drug world, aligning himself with a gang responsible for distributing large quantities of heroin in the capital. His role as an enforcer and gun for hire placed him at the centre of several murder inquiries. Desmond had connections to dissident Republicans and the drug trade in West Dublin. He once again teamed up with Wayne Whelan and another gangster, David Chen Lynch. Desmond gradually drew Whelan into a darker realm of criminality, marked by escalating violence, gun crime, and drug abuse. Alongside Whelan and another gangster, Charles McLean, Desmond operated a significant drugs gang, associating with the Guinea cartel while maintaining their own independent drug network. Mark Desmond also had a long-term association with figures like Didi O'Driscoll and Barry Young from Sligo, for whom he acted as an enforcer. In addition, he was also acting as a link man for Brian Rattigan's gang, while Rattigan was in prison awaiting trial for the murder of his former friend, Dean Gavin. Desmond went on to become a hugely nasty criminal, making serious money and ruling with young guys who were dealing for him. He was known for collecting debts with extreme violence and a huge amount of intimidation. He's even believed to have raped 2 teenage lads who owed him small amounts of money. The sexual attack element shocked people to the core. However, as is often the case in organised crime, feuds began to break out within and between rival gangs in West Dublin and Tallaght. Personal animosities and vendettas emerged among individuals who were once friends and partners in crime. As Desmond's notoriety grew, so did his list of enemies. Aware that he was a target, he never stayed in one place for too long. In 2006, he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt when a gunman, riding pillion on a motorbike, drew up alongside his car at traffic lights on the Old Bourne Road in Tallaght and opened fire. On this occasion, Desmond was being driven by a man called Kevin Kenny when they were targeted by the King Rat gang, led by the notorious Brian Rattigan. Kevin Kenny was a brother of Martin Kenny, who was murdered by Eric Wilson the previous year. The attempt on Desmond's life failed when the gunman's weapon jammed. Desmond was hit once in the arm, while Kevin Kenny was shot in the backside. 5 years later, in July 2011, Kenny was stabbed to death in a bloody gang fight outside an Inchicore pub. A year earlier, Desmond survived a second attempt on his life as 3 men followed him to the Memorial Park in Ballyfermot and one fired a shot at him as he fled. The murder bid was never reported to Gardaí. The man behind the 2006 murder bid is believed to have been gangland figure Anthony Cannon, a close associate and enforcer of Brian Rattigan. 3 years later, in July 2009, Cannon was gunned down, with Desmond being the chief suspect. He was driving when he spotted 2 men on a motorbike, one of them armed. He quickly exited his car and attempted to escape by jumping over railings into nearby Long Meadows Park. The gunman chased him down and began shooting. As Cannon lay wounded on the ground, several shots were fired, hitting him in front of women and children. Despite wearing a bulletproof vest, he couldn't withstand the 11 rounds that were unleashed. Cannon was the 15th person murdered in the so-called Crumlin Drimnagh feud. Furthermore, Mark Desmond was deeply involved in the brutal killing of James Kenny McDonough. McDonough, the 28-year-old father of 2, disappeared in October 2010 and was reported as a missing person. 14 months later, his body was found in a shallow grave in the Dublin Mountains, having been shot dead. Gardaí believed that several of McDonough's associates were members of Desmond's gang. and suspected Madonna must have crossed the group before his murder. Meanwhile, the bond between Desmond on the one hand and Whelan and Lynch on the other also started to show cracks, eventually leading to a serious falling out over drugs and money. Despite the apparent socializing and so-called friendships, Whelan and Lynch were well aware of the danger posed by Desmond and his gang. Professionally, Desmond became a liability to Whelan and Lynch's front businesses, and personally, both men feared him. At one point, Lynch even fled to Liverpool, believing he was at risk of being shot. Lynch, who came from a broken home, moved in with Whelan at a young age. Though not related, they regarded each other as brothers and became deeply involved in organised crime together. They ran a car business as a front to launder drug money. Lynch was a private individual who kept a low profile while quietly building and maintaining his criminal empire. Both Lynch and Whelan had connections with criminal gangs and drug dealers in Ballyfermot, Tala and Clondalkin. They were linked to individuals involved in the ongoing violent feuds and were targets of the Garda's Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, as well as the Criminal Assets Bureau. Whelan, Desmond, Lynch and their fellow gangsters were all impacted by the escalating violence in the greater Clondalkin area. 3 years later, the harsh reality of organised crime caught up with Mark Desmond, as his so-called friends, Wayne Whelan and David Lynch among them, turned against him. On December 2, 2016, while staying at Whelan's house, Desmond received a call from fellow gangster Charles McLean around 7 p.m. McLean, who had long been associated with high-level criminals including Desmond and Whelan, arranged to meet Desmond in Griffin Valley Park in Lucan to discuss criminal matters. Desmond, trusting McLean, did not bring his gun and hid it in nearby bushes, a decision that would prove fatal moments later. Unbeknownst to Desmond, a meticulously planned and deadly double cross awaited him. As he entered Griffin Valley Park, a nearby assailant, armed and ready, approached him. At 41 years old, Desmond met his assassin unarmed and was shot multiple times with a handgun. He sustained fatal injuries to his groin, head and chest, and died at the scene. This execution was clearly professional. 2 bullets to the back, 2 more to the legs to bring him to the ground, and finally, 2 shots to the head to finish the job. Local residents reported hearing loud bangs around 7:20 p.m, and a juvenile witness saw a figure in black fleeing the scene. Shortly after the attack, a partially damaged gun and a spent bullet were discovered next to a burnt-out Mazda 6. The spent bullets recovered from Desmond's body matched this weapon. Additionally, an abandoned white Ford Focus van was found in Clondalkin, and another handgun was uncovered hidden in the park's undergrowth. One of Desmond's former associates believes this was Desmond's own gun, hidden for emergencies. The associate speculates that Desmond, realising the imminent threat, ran back into the park to grab his own gun when he saw whoever was coming for him. In the aftermath of the murder, it quickly became apparent that there were numerous potential suspects, and many people would have wanted Desmond dead. However, it soon emerged that the killing was likely an inside job. After the shooting, McLean had rushed to Whelan's house to search for and dispose of Desmond's phone. McLean was also seen driving the abandoned van, found in Clondalkin. CCTV footage showed individuals connected to McLean buying an unregistered number, a SIM card, and a top-up voucher at the Mill Shopping Centre in Clondalkin in the run-up to the murder. This number, the court later revealed, was only used once, to make the call to Desmond on December 2nd. McLean told the Gardaí he had discarded Desmond's phone by tossing it out the car window and threw the SIM card away. He claimed that Wayne Whelan had instructed him to get rid of the phone. During his interview, McLean admitted that the situation didn't look good, and this was why he decided to flee Dublin. He revealed that he had stayed with his partner at a hotel in Belfast before heading to Tenerife on December 5th. Initially, Garda believed Desmond was targeted in a preemptive strike by a Ballyfermot-based drug gang. In the weeks leading up to his murder, Desmond had been boasting to friends about seeking revenge because his supplier had been withholding drugs and cash from him. This paranoia led him to make wild accusations against his associates. Desmond talked recklessly, never considering that his words might reach those he was dealing with, but they did. His volatile nature had alienated him from the Kinahan cartel, for whom he had initially worked, leaving him to focus solely on selling drugs in West Dublin. Desmond's associates later double-crossed him by informing the major drug suppliers that he had accused a senior gang member. This betrayal likely led to the decision to lure him to Griffin Park on that fateful December evening in 2016. According to one of Desmond's former associates, there was a €100,000 bounty on his head, and someone must have authorised the hit on a mercenary like Desmond. Gardaí were soon convinced that they knew who was behind Desmond's murder and suspected a link to the Kinahan gang, leading to the arrest of 5 people, 4 men and a woman. They believed Desmond had threatened one of their close associates and suspected that the Kinahan gang had orchestrated Desmond's killing as a result. Detectives claimed to have identified the person who shot Desmond after he went to meet McLean in Lucan. Wayne Whelan was suspected of orchestrating the murder of his once close friend and was arrested and questioned. However, Gardaí couldn't gather enough evidence to charge him or David Lynch in connection with the crime. But in October 2020, a major breakthrough occurred leading to Charles McLean getting arrested and charged with the murder. McLean, who had made the fatal call to Desmond, eventually pleaded guilty to obstructing the apprehension of the person responsible for the murder. At that time, McLean was already serving a 16.5-year sentence for his role in the failed murder attempt on his former associate Wayne Whelan, who was shot dead 3 years after Desmond, as well as for the doorstep killing of Thomas McCarthy, a father of 5, at his mother's home in Ballyfermot. In February 2024, McLean received an additional 3.5-year sentence for impeding the capture of Desmond's killer. Before his death, 41-year-old Desmond had been spending time in Liverpool, where he'd found love with an Eastern European woman. Despite this, he often spent days alone, sitting in silence with the TV and radio off, talking to himself. His obsession with death was evident. He frequently speculated about what he would do if faced with imminent danger or drowning. Desmond's criminal activities marked him as one of the most notorious figures in Irish history. Given his actions over the years, it's likely that only a few will mourn his passing. He lived by the gun, and ultimately, he died by it. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.